My name is Randy Bales. I am the host of Bales Sport Collective. Today I'm going to be telling you a short story about why I bought my Dodge Viper. I don't doubt that there's many people that have a certain love or soft spot for this car just like I do. And if you know anything about me is I love late model muscle cars. I love American cars, and I certainly like them from the time period that I think was almost the golden age of when I was growing up, which is about, I'll say like 98 to 2003. Times when ABS was just starting to get pretty good. Traction control was on one button. We had maybe a performance button in the car. And the Viper really was the analog car. But it all started for me, I remember in junior high, I would go into the library, and every single week or every single month they would get in the new edition of whatever magazine we could rent out. And I'll never forget that we had a car and driver back in 2001 that had the ACR Viper, had the Cobra R, and the Z06. And ironically enough, a good buddy of mine sent me that link just a short while ago, and I started tearing up because that article is the reason why I owned those three cars, is because that was the trifecta of my automobile age. And so with a Viper, you have nothing digital, not even in a Gen 2 Viper. You don't even have a digital speedometer, odometer, even the clock and all the dials in it, there's nothing digital inside of it. The radio, that's it. And so it gives you a different experience of driving. And ever since I was a small boy, that's all I wanted. Now, what makes this car great for me is the lines. This car is absolutely the lines. I believe this is for sure in the top 3 to 5 cars ever made for the aesthetics of it. I think that I've said it before that Jaguar E-Type, you've got the old Daytona, you've got the old Ferraris, just that front end and that big swoop in the back that has that built-in spoiler, if you will. So yeah, for some of you though, I think I get a lot of arguments when people talk to me about this. They're like, I love a Gen 2 Viper, but I wanted one with, and inevitably they're gonna say blue with white stripes, like the 96, 97s. And those were not without their novelties, I'll say. This one being an 02, it is the last of the Gen 2. So this one does have ABS, does not have traction control, and there are, I believe, several more refinements as they went through the years. But going back to it, when I get in this car, it's got long gears. It's got an exhaust note that's not like any other car. The motor just feels way out in front of you and you feel like you're over the back tires, which means any kind of subtle hint that back end's gonna be going out. And I think we're running like 2 or 335s on the back right now, and you can run bigger. But if the back end does start to go, it does feel like it will go and continue to go where it wants to go. But yeah, I'll never forget just going to Burcott's supermarket in Mokina, Illinois as a young kid and grabbing an Auto Trader out of the free thing, and I'd sit there and rifle through it. And over the years that evolved from IROCs to Z28s to, Cobras, and then eventually into what I believed was the best version of the Viper, which was the Gen 2. So I had an opportunity to buy this car back in 2022. And like many people, I'm on eBay, Bring a Trailer, I'm looking at Facebook Marketplace, I'm looking at other smaller shops that are selling cars like this. And I found this one for what I thought would be a good deal on a small negotiation, something brief. I'm not really obsessive over getting a killer deal on a car. I don't like beating people up too bad, but I do like to find them like anybody else. So this was a one owner, 12,000 mile car, and I found it on eBay. And it was at Classic Car Studios outside of, I believe, St. Louis. and they're a reputable dealership, along with they do some restoration on cars. So when I saw it, I called them up immediately. And this is not the first time I've done this off of eBay, where I just call up and I say, okay, tell me about the car. We negotiated on a price. I asked them a few things. They offered me, I believe, the original wheels that were on this. So the salesman told me these wheels had never actually touched the ground before I owned them. The only owner had a set of aftermarket wheels on them. But then I noticed the single stripe, and clean Carfax, really concerned that maybe the thing had something dripped on it or hail damage. Nope, it turns out the previous owner just wanted a single stripe on it, from what I was told. So of course, when I got the car sight unseen, I did have it shipped out, hot shot, enclosed. I was immediately inspecting the car to make sure, like, did I get screwed over on this? But the paint was done really well, and I liked the unique nature of the single stripe as opposed to the dual stripe. So that was another selling point. So after the purchase of the vehicle, it was getting shipped from the Midwest, and it's coming off the trailer. I get the phone call. Anybody who's had a car shipped to them knows that you are heavily anticipating the day, and it never seems to be that the transport truck drivers are there on time. Or I feel like there's always a snowstorm when I buy a car and have it shipped in. So there's the anticipation of, is it going to be the car that I saw on the internet or I spoke with a salesman about? Am I going to be immediately disappointed with that? I had never driven one, so I was really hoping that I actually liked the car. I knew I would. And then this 53-foot trailer, luckily the guy's rolling up with a Ford Super Duty. I tend to be more of a Ford guy. I was excited. Big long trailer backs into my old shop, or right in front of it, and I didn't realize how low the car was at a stock height. There is an additional air dam underneath the bumper, and so as we're lowering it down, what seemed to be 20-foot ramps, I can just even see on the video how close that gets. And since then, that's had to touch a little bit of pavement, only because it's gonna happen, but it was clean. And yeah, that day, getting in the car and then remembering, any Viper I sat in is kind of difficult to get in, so you figure out your new dance move to slide into the car like butter, and then eventually you get good at it. This one was no different than that. And then, yeah, just the anticipation. It was also one of those things where I only had an opportunity to take it for like a quick spin up and down the road before I had to get to some other appointments. And, anytime you get a car, you should probably just cancel the rest of your day so you can kind of fall in love with it, get to know it, especially when it's that much anticipation for that many decades to own it. I knew I didn't want to modify this car just for the fact that it was so clean, and I have a bad habit of modifying vehicles, and this one is just fine the way it is. It does have some Continentals on it, which were only available during that time based on shortages. They are not my favorite tire, but I'm still working on burning through these. So yeah, stock motor, stock interior. The only thing I did was I let Blue Chip Audio in Denver change out the stock CAD unit for something that looked authentic. You could change the LEDs to the proper color, and it would hook up to my Bluetooth. Since then, the smell is interesting. Love the smell of a car. The seatbelts are on the other side, so that's unique when you get in it. And it was my first time driving one when I got the car. But I'm okay with that because that was the day I did get to meet my hero. Since owning the car, and I did buy this car I think 2 or 3 weeks before I got married. My wife thinks that's sort of convenient. It was. I've loved the car. For longer trips, this car's been up to Steamboat on what I would say more milder rallies, social rallies. I do bring it up to shows. But my favorite part about a lot of the cars I own, especially this one, is if I'm at a gas station or if I'm pulled somewhere stopped and a young kid or even an older guy comes up and shows appreciation for the car, the first thing I'm doing is insisting that they give me their cell phone, they sit down and let me take a picture of you in it. Because this car for me tugs on the strings of that timeline of when I wanted things that I couldn't have. But it also was the basis of the motivation for how hard I've worked and for the interests that I've continued on for many, many years. As I know, the people that I'm probably closest with in the automobile industry probably feel the same way. So with this, I like to share it, I like to show it. I don't drive it overly aggressive. I have other cars that are built to beat on. This is not one of them, although it does get the occasional burnout. One of the allures of these cars was when they started building these in the early 90s, it was the car that shouldn't have happened. And of course they started with this motley, doesn't have door handle, doesn't have windows. It was really long, but it was essentially going for gold with something that American car companies hadn't done. I mean, you had a car that was gonna be $70,000, which was no slouch back then for a price tag, but its only competitors were maybe something that was going to be far cheaper, less powerful, and it certainly wasn't going to have a V10 in it. So as much as these cars would seem like they were kind of thrown together with a fair amount of R&D, they were every single thing that I think the developers absolutely tapped into their boyhood side of, let's make the motor way too big, like Carroll Shelby did. Let's make the thing really long and swoopy. Like, I'm sure there were some very elementary words that were used while they were building the car. And like, we have parts for this. You know, there's this thing called ABS and traction control. Nah, we don't need it. What they may have included in that conversation at the time was, we want our buyers to buy another one and they therefore need to be alive to do so. The cars would slingshot all over the place, and they were known for being rough and tumble and completely rowdy. It just, goes back to that analog mention, is that there's nothing on this car that's gonna save your life except for a little bit of fear and maybe some talent. And so that V10, 8 liters, I mean, they started at 8 liters. It's just massive. And that's why it needs, the irony too is that the car itself, having an 8-liter motor, the engine's not over the front wheels. It's actually pushed back towards the back end of the cab, almost like a Humvee, which assisted with the balance of the car as well. So you definitely feel all the power in the front and the weight of that motor immediately getting kicked through. I'm gonna go ahead and say it, it's a primitive transmission. I would even go as far to say is that they're clunky, but really long gears and a lot of rubber in the back gave it exactly what it needed to attempt to put down the torque that this car puts down. And it's torque. You can talk about the horsepower, you feel the torque. This is very beefy from the bottom end. And that's what makes it such a joy to drive, is you feel that as soon as the clutch is completely out, no matter what gear you're in, you feel the momentum that's coming from the bottom end on this. I also like this car because it's not practical. It has very little trunk space in this particular one. The Z06 counterpoint to this, you could fit 3 sets of golf clubs and me in. This one barely, it cannot carry 2 carry-ons home from the airport. So I have to have an excuse to drive this to and from a place with no intentions of needing it to be practical. I think it gets 11 miles to the gallon in the city, 21 miles to the gallon on the highway, being a big efficient V10 at that point. I always fell in love with the 3.5 seconds 0 to 60, and I think it was like 11.7 in the quarter mile. Here at altitude, it's not doing that, but doesn't matter. It doesn't need any more power. All it needs is a little TLC, a little paint correction, which I did that. We did some PPF expel all over it. And ever since then, I've just been enjoying the car. So what I hope is that you can understand a little bit more today about how it feels for me to own this vehicle and why I bought it, and why any one of our viewers or friends buy their cars, whether they be a dream car or a stepping stone. This one for me, it might be up on a forklift, being lifted onto a mezzanine and drained at some point, just for the simple fact that my favorite part of this car over driving it is actually just looking at it. So thanks for letting me share.